I'm not ever going to believe that you're not running for U.S. Senate. What you just said, who doesn't vote for that?
Will you be my running mate?
No. Tom, thanks for being here.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. It's exciting.
I got to know you, for the listener who doesn't know how I got to know you, I got to know you via Anna, who is on the regional board of IDEA Public School. And so I met you at some of the events and had gone to plenty of events. And I got to tell you, there's some of the most inspirational stories that we go to events all the time, right? But whether or not they move you or not, nothing really quite moves me like the IDEA School does.
No, thanks. I appreciate that.
But for you, I got to get my mind around growing up in Ohio, going to Georgetown, and ending up in McAllen, Texas. Can you help me with that?
Yeah, and I mean, nobody just ends up in McAllen, Texas by mistake, right? You're not just passing through McAllen. But
I had to look it up where it was.
Yeah, I mean, I was told I was going to the Rio Grande Valley, so I got out a map, and I'm trying to find Rio Grande Valley on a map. Mm-hmm. If you're in Texas, you know the Rio Grande Valley is the border, but I wasn't from Texas. So I couldn't find the place in a map, and I'm like, I'm a senior at Georgetown. I'm moving to a place I can't even find in a map. I thought this is not quite how I thought my career, from an elite university was going to start. Right. But, my senior year at Georgetown, I couldn't find anything that was really, inspiring me or exciting me. And I joined this program called Teach for America. And then the program was only, 7, 8 years old. Now it's been around for 25, 26 years. But the whole idea, Wendy Kopp founded Teach for America, and she said, instead of people joining the Peace Corps and going abroad, what if we got some of this talent to stay right here in the U.S.? And her idea was to get leaders who were going to be, business leaders, political leaders, you name it. She wanted them to first have an experience where they had taught in inner city or rural low-income schools, because she thought, we're never going to change the U.S. unless people actually understand what it takes to make a difference in these communities.
But you wanted to be a teacher anyways, or no?
No, I was going to do Teach for America and then, go back and get my MBA or go to law school and then, work on Capitol Hill or something generic like that. Huh.
And then life got in the way.
Yeah, so I ended up teaching.
This amazing idea got in the way.
I ended up teaching 4th grade in Donna, Texas. And 9, 10-year-old students. And it was pretty shocking. I mean, here we are, U.S. school system, kids who were born in the U.S., who have been in American schools their entire life, and a lot of them, can't speak a word of English. And we've got 9-year-olds who are
Your class couldn't speak English?
Kids in my class, kids across the hall. I mean, obviously, some of them could, but I thought, how do we have a school system in this country that is doing such a horrible job of educating, our young people? And kind of the crazy thing about the Valley is, two things. One, the 1st and 3rd poorest counties in the U.S., Hidalgo and Cameron County, they're in the Rio Grande Valley. But then the second stat is that every year you look at the fastest growing places in the country, and McAllen, Brownsville, the Valley region, it's always in the top 2, top 3, top 4. So that's a bad combination, high poverty and high growth without really high educational outcomes. So I thought, man, we can do better than this. I'm like, our country, the United States of America, we can do better by these kids. But I didn't quite know how to do it. And then,
well, you were 24 years old.
Yeah, 24 years old. And, I'm sure everybody's had a job where they're looking around and they're saying, man, I could do better than these guys.
Right.
But that's how I felt about the school I was at. I thought, I don't know if I can start an amazing school, but I can do better than this. So I wrote a little note to Governor Bush and said, hey, I would love it if you would give me a chance to start this school. And his people at the state education agency got back to me, and they said, we think you got a really good plan.
But hang on a second. I mean, they must get thousands of letters every week.
Yeah, they get a process. I mean, I'm
Did
simplifying
you know somebody,
it a
or
little bit.
you just sent it to?
No, there's I actually wrote the letter to the state education agency, which he's in charge of it 'cause he's the governor, and they have this process every year. You can apply for permission to open up what's called a charter school. And Governor Bush, when he was governor, he invented that legislation back in the late 90s. And I think there had been about 4 or 5 years worth of charter schools when I came around, and there were a couple that had already been up and running, and I visited those schools, and I thought I could definitely do this. So I asked the state of Texas for permission, and they said yes. And it's a pretty basic guarantee. They say we will pay the tuition for your students, and you have to deliver on what you promise you're going to deliver. And I said, well, we're going to get every single one of our students into college and off to college. And, supposedly the state is going to hold you accountable to that. Now, the bad thing is there's a lot of people who operate charters who don't do what they say they're going to do, and the state doesn't come and close them down, which they should, but that's like a whole other podcast. Right. But yeah, so we started this little school on the second floor of the First Baptist Church in downtown Texas.
I was going to say, you have to have a schoolhouse.
Yeah, we rented space in the Baptist church, and with about 150 kids, and we told parents, and look, I mean, I'm 24 years old.
Right.
I'm probably not inspiring a lot of confidence to these parents, and we're in this
largely Hispanic, all Hispanic.
100% Hispanic.
Okay.
About 98% of our students then were from low-income families. And I said, well, I'm going to get your kids to college, but this is the bargain. You're going to come to 5 o'clock every day. You're going to come on Saturday. You're going to give up most of your summer. And it was quite a sales pitch, I'm sure these kids are like, Mom, Dad, do not sign me up for this school. But kids signed up, and before I knew it, we had thousands of students on the waiting list.
Wow. And we'll, as part of this podcast, we'll have the B-rolls, so let's call it, of what we just shot over at one of the campuses here in Austin. So the listener, you'll start to see, it's amazing to me, you're in the basement of a church to where it's coming today, or to where this particular campus was today, an old bowling alley, which I thought was pretty cool, that is beautiful. It was, it's been a long time since I was in middle school. This particular campus was a middle school that we first walked into. And my middle school wasn't like that. I mean, it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't like that. It wasn't clean. It wasn't quiet. It was different.
Yeah. The level of focus of our students is crazy. But I was, the thing that always strikes me is, I mean, I've thousands of families over the year I've gotten to know, especially the first 5-6 years when I'm running IDEA, because I'm running the organization, but I'm also teaching full-time, and, the full-time fundraiser and principal and business manager. I mean, it was just crazy in the beginning.
In the first year, how many other teachers you weren't the only teacher?
No, we had 20 adults, probably about half of us were teachers. The other half, custodians, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, that sort of thing. So it was about 150 kids and about 20 adults. And that story told about the sales pitch we gave and how parents were signing up for it. To me, that's so important because people assume that low-income kids are doing bad in school because their parents don't care, which actually is not the case. I mean, we find kids all the time, and parents, they want the best for their kids, but oftentimes they're trapped in low-performing schools. And the low-income schools typically get the crappiest teachers and the crappiest building and the crappiest curriculum, and the crappiest everything, and then they get crappy scores, and people are like, oh, what's wrong with these low-income parents? And it's like, no, I mean, it is, you got to build schools that are going to really challenge kids and really demand a lot from them, and they really do rise to the challenge.
We were in one class today, you'll have to refresh my memory, second graders. Well, the first class we walked into of second graders, it was their reading class. They were reading mid-level third grade, and then we walked across the hall, and those second graders were reading at a fourth grade level.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just, and when I think of that, I'm like, okay, I have a first grader and a third grader. I mean, that's pretty dang humbling when you think about that. I mean, you have to take a step back and not be me just walking around, but be the parent going, wow, that's legit.
And as a result, last year, over 50,000 families applied to get into IDEA for only 8,000 or 9,000 slots. This year, I mean, we're still 7 months away from next school year. We're already at over 32,000 applicants, and right here in Austin, that number is over 10,000 all across Texas. Well, plus Baton Rouge, where we're opening up next year. You add it all up, and it's about 30-some thousand. So, parents know if you don't get your kid in a great school, like they're basically screwed.
Right.
And you can't access the American dream if you're not in a great school. A lot of schools should be like this ladder out of poverty, but oftentimes they're just another government institution that's kind of reinforcing, the existing kind of
Yeah,
class.
status quo.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, when I look at those second graders that are reading at a fourth grade level and are standing up and bragging about it and talking about it and excited about it, like, those kids, when we were in the classroom, I was like, if that kid is on the east, just at the regular, I don't know what other school here in Austin or any other town, because I always worked off the assumption that smart people are smart because they were born smart. But I think my view on that changed today, because if those kids were in McAllen, 30 years ago, whenever you came onto the scene, they wouldn't be smart. Yeah. But it's a real testament to you and the teachers and the entire staff that it's just they're not born that way. They were taught that way, and I've always worked off the other assumption.
Most people did. I mean, for years, people thought that IQ was static. It was, you either, like you said, smart or dumb. But what we've been able to show, and there's a lot of emerging research that shows that intelligence is malleable. It is malleable, and it's completely connected to how hard you work.
Right.
I mean, you're an athlete. Yeah, it takes a little bit of ability. That's kind of what separates the super elite people. But man, you can get. I mean, I always say, not everyone's going to win a marathon, but everybody could complete a marathon. Right. Yeah, maybe not everyone's going to go to Stanford or Harvard, but all of our kids are going to go off to college.
Yep. And so,
in fact, we got a lot of kids at Harvard and Stanford. So,
right, and we're going to get to that. On top of that, this is a super cool part of the story. So now we've had, call it 18 years of IDEA Public School, and we're now 61 schools, 36,000 students, going to 173 schools, and 100,000 students by 2022.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I know that's some pretty crazy scale. I mean, we got a lot. We have to really work it to get there. But yeah.
And to build the infrastructure, I get that the state pays the tuition. What do they pay for tuition, the state?
Yeah, we spend about $10,000 per kid per year.
Okay.
I think about 8,000 of that comes from the state, about 1,000 comes from the feds, and about 1,000 comes from private donations.
Yeah. But to build these schools, that also comes from, I mean, obviously the state's not building the school. I don't think. Yeah. That comes from private donations.
Yeah, when we built a school, at the school you saw today, this old bowling alley that we renovated, and then we built a gym and all that sort of stuff. We just issue bonds like everyone else does who builds schools, and we use the bond proceeds to build the school, and then the revenue that's generated from the enrollment is how we pay back the bonds over the years. So
and explain, because I think people. Well, two things. One, there are anti-charter school people.
Yeah.
Which is, if you look at these stats and you look at the fact that 100% of your kids are going to go off to college, many of them to Ivy League schools, I'm not really sure how we can be against that. But there are those people. But I think the other assumption that a lot of people make is that they're not clear on who funds charter schools versus a private school versus a public school.
Yeah, I mean, as charter schools, like I said, we're the name of our organization, IDEA Public Schools.
Right.
We're public schools. We're publicly funded. I mean, our big advantage is that we're a nonprofit corporation, like what's called a 501c3, as you obviously know very well. But our big advantage is that we don't have an elected school board. So, I mean, all of our board members, they're donors, they're supporters, they're people like your wife who really care about it. So that allows us to do really big, innovative, crazy things that you just can't do when you have the churn and burn of an elected, school board, basically. So. And
what about sports? What say for example, you have an IDEA public school, high school.
Yeah.
Do they? Yet it's a public school. So, do they play sports? Do they have a football team? Do they have a baseball team? Do they have a swim team?
Yeah, so the short answer is yes, and I'll tell you this little story.
And do they play other charter schools, or do they play other public schools?
Both.
Okay.
Both. And in some cases, actually, our students are playing the absolute top athletes in the whole country. And I'll give you an example. Soccer is huge in the Rio Grande Valley. Yeah. I mean, huge. I mean, it's really getting huge everywhere in the U.S., but the Valley is about 20 years ahead of where the rest of the U.S. is. I mean, and there's a semi-pro team down in the Valley called the Toros, and they're associated with the Houston Dynamo, the MLS team. And
my good friend's the owner there.
No kidding.
Yeah, Gabriel Brenner.
Oh yeah, fantastic.
Yeah,
Well,
wonderful man.
Well,
A plus.
He'll love this story
Okay.
because he basically, because of him putting the toros down in the valley, along with some other valley folks as well. They have this little junior, kind of 15, 16, 17-year-old soccer team.
Yeah, like a select team.
Like a select team.
Yeah.
But they were having a really hard time figuring out how to do the whole education piece of it, and they couldn't get any school districts to do it. So a buddy of mine who's president of it down there said, "Hey, Tom, can you help us get through to these districts, these school districts?" And I said, "No, like we'll do it." So we've got about 200 students now who are these amazing soccer athletes, boys and girls. And then they're also in our school that we created just for these soccer students. And when they're in Florida at the ING tournament, which is like, the best.
This sounds like a tennis academy.
Yeah, so the teachers go with the kiddos and, they're doing soccer, but then they're also getting all their studies done. So,
Wow.
And last year, we started small last year. It was the first year. We had 13 seniors, and every single one got an athletic scholarship.
Really?
Which was just,
Another great story.
Come on, 100% of your kids getting athletic scholarships. Like nobody's doing that in the state of Texas. And it's pretty amazing. I've got a couple kids out at Air Force Academy,
Wow.
through that program. And I've been really impressed by these young men and women.
Huh.
But our other schools all have, sports as well.
Yeah. Wow. And then why would somebody, what do you say if somebody's anti-charter school?
Well, school
Maybe anti is not the right word, but
no,
but
people are totally anti-charter school. I got to tell you,
Okay,
like,
you said it.
school districts have had a really sweet deal for the past 100 years. They've basically had a total monopoly. I guess if you could afford private school, then you could opt out of the public school system. But otherwise, you're the only game in town. You're like the way the post office was before FedEx and UPS came along.
We're not allowed to talk about the Postal Service on here.
Yeah, right. Well,
I'm kidding. We can talk about it. No, I got you.
But that's so obviously districts don't like charters because all of a sudden now they got to compete, they got to up their game. And not only that, but like I said, with 50,000 kids who apply at IDEA, there's tens of thousands of families who are not getting in, and now those parents are going to the school district that they're zoned to, and they're beating down the doors of the principal and the superintendent and the school board, and they're saying, I can't get my kid in this IDEA school, so this school's got to improve. Look at their test scores. Look at these crappy scores. Look at how all those kids are getting great, high school counseling and going off to college, and my kid's getting nothing. So, that is part of our strategy is, we actually want districts to improve. We want them to get better because when schools improve, kids win, and that's basically what we're all about, what I'm all about.
Right. I love how it's all color coded. So obviously call it uniforms, call it, whatever. The sixth graders were red, or at least at the Runberg campus, red, and then the seventh graders were kind of a burnt orange, and then the eighth graders blue. I guess that's standard throughout. Just keeps it. I love my older daughters, the twins, Grace and Isabel, went to a private school for middle school, and they had uniforms. And they, at first they hated the idea, but then they ended up being like, this is one less thing I have to think about. And it eliminates the drama of, wearing some sort of, not that your kids are out there trying to, they're probably not,
But look, it's also, it's part of a sense of identity, part of team. Like, you look at any profession and they got their uniforms. You had your uniform that you wore. One of our board members, David Robinson, he proudly wore the Spurs uniform for a long time. Yeah. Any world-class organization has a uniform. Even like IBM, they were famous for their, they call it Big Blue. They were famous for kind of the blue pinstripe suits and white shirts and ties that their people would wear. Right. So is the same thing. Like I want for our students to wear that shirt with pride and be like, yeah, I earned I earned my slot here, and I'm really proud to be an IDEA student.
Yeah. Do they have to? That's a good question. If you have 32,000 people already on how does somebody? Do you have to write an essay? Do you have to have a great story? Do you have to know somebody? How do you pick them?
Because we're trying to shake things up, I knew that if we had a selection process, the first thing that districts would say is, well, of course IDEA's hitting out of the park because, they're creaming. They're just
they're
getting the
recruiting.
very, very best.
They're recruiting.
But actually, we just had our lottery last week,
Okay, so
and
it's a
it's a blind lottery system, so it's completely random. So the kid with straight A's has the same chance of getting in as the kid who maybe has a parole officer and is a ninth grader for the fourth consecutive year.
Right.
So equal shots. So and what we're trying to show is, like you said, it's not about who our kids are. It's about how hard they work, and that's what's going to make the difference.
You should write a book.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, I'll work on it.
Have you thought about it?
Yeah, you
don't have to write it. Somebody else will write it for you.
Maybe you've got some names you can give me, people who can help me out with that. Huh?
Yeah.
Well,
what about politics?
What about politics?
Well, I mean, I'm listening to you and watching you, and I've seen you at multiple events on stage behind the mic. I saw you interacting with adults and children alike today, and I think obviously you're busy now, but has that ever crossed your mind? Well, entering into politics.
Yeah,
we don't need to have a discussion about politics.
I got you, man.
Especially now.
I got you. It's interesting you say that because, like I said, when I was at Georgetown, my plan was to one day run for the U.S. Senate. But because everything that we're doing is so publicly financed, we just got a big bill passed that made a big difference for us. And it took us 15 years to get it passed. And having seen basically and you know this, you get that moonshot cancer thing passed a decade ago. It was very unusual how quickly you made it happen. Having seen the pace of it, I'm making so much more of a difference doing what I'm doing now on the outside than I could if I were an elected official. So I'm totally happy with the role I'm playing.
I think that's right. I think you're, well, I know what you just said is right, that you're making a much bigger difference.
If you were a politician, you never would have been able to get that cancer thing passed.
Yeah.
It was your ability, you had celebrity going for you and all that sort of stuff, but outside people, I think that's where all the action is.
Well, and that's why I've intentionally not ever aligned with a party or a candidate or any politician because, for example, with Prop 15, as the figurehead of it, or as the leader of it, or the face of it rather, I needed votes.
Yeah,
I needed the voters to vote for a cancer initiative, and if that voter goes in and is a Republican and says, well, this guy's I'm not voting for that. He's a Democrat. I lose half my votes. So, yeah, that's. But with that, I hear you. With the passage of that, we did a lot more good than I could ever do being, a mayor or a congressman or whatever.
What was that? It was like $1.5 billion for cancer research, some crazy number like that.
It's $3 billion.
Oh my gosh,
$3 billion.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, and it keeps. And the cool thing about, not that we're not here to talk about me, but the cool thing about what it created was called CPRIT, so the Cancer Prevention Research Institute of Texas. What it did for cities like Houston and hospitals like MD Anderson or UT Southwestern in Dallas, they are recruiting the best of the best. So they may be at Duke, they may be at Sloan Kettering. They're all coming to Texas because we have this windfall that it's pretty. That when I look back on that wasn't easy to get it passed, but it worked. Yeah. Let's talk about, you mentioned David Robinson. Back up. Everybody's a fan of David Robinson. It's
Everybody.
You show me a David Robinson hater, and I'm going to tell you that the world is flat.
Yes.
He's just the nicest dude. He was, has this story from the Air Force Academy and was clean cut and a badass on the court. But he's been a big supporter of y'all.
Big supporter. He
and
called me.
A close friend of yours.
Yeah, we in 2012, I got a phone call out of the blue, and it was from David Robinson, and he told me the story of this great school that he had founded, and he asked me to come visit it, and I was blown away. On the east side of San Antonio, he spent about $20 million of his own money to build this beautiful school. And if you're from Texas, this architecture firm called Lake Flato.
Sure.
So Lake Flato designed this. They did
the Livestrong.
They did Livestrong.
Yes.
So they did this school. He spared no expense. It's this beautiful school on the east side in the shadow of the Alamo Dome. And he said, I want a school that inspires this community and he had a sliding scale for tuition. So the less you made, the less you paid. The wealthy parents paid full freight, and he'd scaled it up to about 110 students. His own children went there. They're grown now. The youngest one's a junior at Duke University, and but it wasn't a sustainable business model. I mean, he and his wife Valerie were writing 7-figure checks every year, and I mean, very few people can do that for 40, 50 years continuously.
Right. And
especially
he'd have an annual gala to make up some of it, but then he'd have to
exactly.
Yeah.
So he called me. I think originally, I sort of forget the details now, but I think originally he wanted me to advise him on how he might go about changing from a private school to a charter school. And, he came down to the Rio Grande Valley, down to McAllen. His mom came down with him. His father came down with him. All three of them toured our schools. And, I mean, there was just such chemistry, but just total alignment in values and like what we all thought was important. And at some point, David just turned to me and said, why don't you just take over the Carver Academy, the school that he started, Carver Academy? And I said, David, I'll do it, but you got to stay involved. And I knew that if David was just involved with that one little school, he might get a little frustrated with changes that were being made. So I needed to get him excited about this big vision. So in 2012, we announced that we were going to do 20 schools in a 5-year period. And we just opened the 20th school last year. And I mean, and a lot of that is because of David. And, when David tells people, this is a good program, I believe in it, I'm putting my energy behind it. I mean, people really believe in it.
In San Antonio, I mean, David Robinson could, walk into the bank with a gun and be like, yo, I'm going to take a couple thousand. They're like, okay. I mean, his reputation is that impeccable.
Well, I'll tell you a brief little story about that. David and I were walking from one building to another, and it was 3 blocks away. We said, let's just walk. It was a beautiful day in San Antonio. And I mean, all these cars, start pulling over, Admiral, we love you.
Yeah.
And this one lady's walking her dog, and she's like, will you take a selfie? So she had me take not a selfie, she had me take a picture. And she's like, will you hold this for me? And
What, the dog?
I had to hold the bag of dog poop.
Gross.
And take the picture of this woman and David. Everybody loves David in San Antonio for very good reason. So that's how we got to 20 schools in San Antonio. It's been pretty great.
Yeah. And you guys were just in New York.
We were, yeah.
He had never heard of you. What you were telling me earlier, his son plays for Duke, so you went to the Duke game, and then to return the favor, I think you said you wanted to take him to Hamilton, and he said, well, what's that?
I sent him, don't ever do something fun with me because it's going to be boring. So I sent him a couple of weeks ago this 800-page book that Hamilton's based on. And I said, David, a little light reading for you before we see the musical. And it was amazing. So my kids are all real young, real little kids, and his kids are all grown. But we all got together. We watched Hamilton. The next day we went and saw the Duke game. And he and his wife did a great job raising those 3 boys. They're all spectacular.
What does he do like at a basketball game? Like when I watch my kids in their sports, like I just kind of stay out of it, right? I mean, obviously cheer and say good job, but like I don't get critical or you should have done. What does the Admiral do with his kids?
You need to have a podcast with David,
okay.
and he can come tell you that. But I know
because you get the parent that's aggro and like I'm like, bro, chill. How does he handle it?
He, Coach K had him in the locker room last year. And after one of the games or before one of the games, I forget the details, but, it was basically David just not one thing he told these young men was about basketball. It was all about how to be a better man, a better person, a better husband at some point, a better son. That just and every time you talk with David, you just leave on cloud 9 like you can go take on the world. He's like one of the most inspiring people I've ever met before.
Yeah. He's I first met him in Hawaii. Oh God, this is 6 or 7 years ago. He had I don't know if he still has a place there or not, but he discovered this neighborhood via Michael and Susan Dell, and he was there, or him and his family were there with them. So that just completes the triangle because Michael and Susan are big supporters of IDEA School here in Austin.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you knew that or not, but they're pretty tight.
I wasn't aware of that. Yeah, I'll tell you the story about.
Ask the Admiral.
I'll ask
very
him.
close.
I got something to ask him next time I see him.
But the story of the Dells is just too good.
Well, so I mean, it's 2005. You know, by this time I'm in my late 20s. We still just had one school. I mean, we had no system for anything. I mean, we had thousands of stacks of paper of kids who were, you know, applying and who were on wait lists, and we just couldn't even keep track of them anymore. And I'm still, you know, teaching half the day and doing all that stuff. And then I thought, man, all these kids want to get in. We got to open up more schools. And I got a phone call from Bill Gates. And he said, you know, my wife and I have started a foundation, which is a little crazy because now they're pretty much synonymous with it. But, you know, this is 10, 12 years ago. Right. And he said, we started a foundation, we've done our research, and your school is getting some of the best results in America. We want to help you grow. So I put a little application together or wrote a letter and sent it off for them. And his people called me back and they said, you know, when Mr. Gates called you, he really wanted you to dream big. And I thought they were going to call and yell at me for being a greedy bastard and asking for too much money, right? And they're like, this is way too small. Like we wanted a big request. So he actually sent this team of experts down to help us put together this business plan. And you know, he and his wife very generously funded a big part of that plan. But then he also got us in touch with the Dells and, you know, Michael and Susan Dell. I should know this. I think Michael and Susan may have actually given even more, you know, through their foundation than the Gateses gave. And that was just like this whole new world for us because all of a sudden, you know, we could never grow or expand or, you know, it takes a lot of, you know, training and systems and processes. And we were on a real shoestring budget and we were in the Rio Grande Valley. So it's not like we're in New York City or Austin where we're going to, you know, raise a lot of money at a gala or something. But they really helped us accelerate our growth. And you know, fast forward, I mean, this year we're hiring 1,000 employees.
That's great. You told me that when we were touring.
I mean, 17 years ago, 18 years ago, I never would have thought that we'd be where we are today.
I know when we were walking around there, I was like, you know, we'd walk into the classrooms. I mean, I worked off the assumption also that all the teachers knew who you were, but these kids, I was like, hey, Tom, do you think this kid knows who you are? My bet is they're like, who are these people that just walked in? Unless there's pictures in their books or they watch a video but you were like, I hope so. But just back to the Dells real quick. Shout out to them. They are so damn generous. I mean, besides your stuff, I mean, the new medical school, they funded the children's hospital, they funded the children's museum. Just incredibly generous.
Yeah. Well, and you know, I don't know if this is known yet. I might be making some news right here on your show, on your podcast. They actually,
we like when people do that.
Well, we're opening up a high school that's a pre-medical high school, and it's going to be right here in Austin.
Wow.
And we've already raised nearly $20 million for it. And the Dells kicked in about $1 million of that, I think. And it's going to be associated with, you know, the Dell Medical School and, you know, Dell Children's and sort of all that. So I'm really excited.
Under the IDEA brand.
Under the IDEA brand. Oh, and what's interesting about this is almost all of our schools serve, you know, we're at about 85, 90% low income population. But some of our schools are at 99% low income. Mm-hmm. But this is going to be a much more diverse by design school, you know, socioeconomically diverse, racially diverse. I mean, when I look around the U.S., I think we got to do a better job of getting people from all walks of life kind of running into each other like every single day, for like 12, 13 years straight. That's part of the challenge we have in the U.S. is you can just kind of go your whole life and your whole day without ever having to deal with anybody in a different economic bracket.
Oh, buddy. I mean, look at, you know, when you just look at Austin. I mean, look at all across the country when they started busing kids from the poor side to the wealthy side so that they could go to better schools, et cetera. You know, you see what happens. I mean, that's where my kids go to Westlake High School, my older kids.
Yes.
Which is part of the Eanes School District,
yep.
Which was, for lack of a better way to say it, was white flight.
Yeah.
That's how Eanes became that's why Westlake, they're like, oh, let's move out to the hills and we're going to, I mean, it's crazy.
And your private school tuition basically just built into your mortgage. So it's a public school. You just got to,
it is, I will say, it's a great school,
yeah,
but
it is.
But it's a white school.
Yeah.
Yeah. But these kids that you first met, right, the 100 some odd of them in 2000, your first class.
Right.
How many of them do you keep in touch with? I mean, you follow these people? I mean, there must be. I don't know how old they must be now, but do you keep in touch with any of them?
So yes, we do. We actually have a lot of them working with us right now.
Wow.
I mean, they're really all over the country. This first group of students, so there are only about 35 of them, and they graduated in 2007. And every single one of them applied to college, and they all were accepted to college. And then a few months after graduating, 100% of them enrolled for the first day of their freshman year. And since 2007, what would that be? 12 graduating classes now, 11 graduating classes. For all but 2 of those years, we've had the 100% matriculation. In fact, last year we didn't, but that young woman actually enrolled this past month. So I'm going to count that as 100%.
Wow, so
she did take a semester off.
Slacker.
Man,
it shows she did a walkabout, Australian style or something.
But Lance, I got to tell you, it's pretty crazy. So like you and Anna's, like your children, they've got a 98% chance of graduating college if they show up for the first day of their freshman year. 98%. Low income kids.
Is that right?
Yep, kids who are from the bottom income quartile. That means your parents make $35,000 or less. They're graduating at a 9% rate. And all these people out there saying, hey, the world needs ditch diggers and college isn't for everybody. And I'm like, all right, how about your white kids? Are we going to have white ditch diggers? I mean, is that what you're talking about? I mean, when people say that sort of stuff, they always mean other people's kids. Right. It's like college for me, but not for thee. So, I mean, it is one of those things. It's such a fixable problem.
Yeah.
Like we have shown that when you demand a lot from young people, like they'll give it to you.
So if you just looked at, and because I believe that you know the answer to this, if you looked at just the education system / infrastructure / problem issue in America, what is the single biggest thing if you were the superintendent of America's schools, what would you do? And maybe there's 2 or 3 things, but
I mean, there's a couple things. Number one, you need a badass principal leading every single school.
Okay.
I mean, and it just and they're not born, they're made. And I mean, we put a lot of training. We get these really exceptional leaders, a lot of young leaders. A lot of young people in their early 30s, late 20s running schools for us, and they're doing a really exceptional job. So that's number one. And the reason they're important is because they're a magnet for talent. They find really great teachers, and I mean they do whatever it takes to keep them. So that's number 2 is just making sure that we've got a great teacher in every single classroom. So what do? We pay our best teachers more than our lower performing teachers.
Yeah, it's shocking what teachers make.
And I mean we paid out $8 million in bonuses last year, which is like, oh, big deal. Companies do it all the time. Yeah, but we're a public school, and we pay bonuses based on performance, which is like revolutionary. So you say like, why do people hate charter schools? It's stuff like this, just trying to shake up the system a little bit. So principals number 1, teachers number 2, and number 3 is, I mean, hard work. You have got to just make kids bust their ass every single day that they're in school. And that brings me to number 4. No one's going to work hard every single day if they don't have a goal. It's just drudgery. So we work really hard with families and students to help them try to envision who they want to be. And like we're going to break that down into, weekly goals, monthly goals, quarterly goals, annual goals. And there's going to be lots of talk about how you're progressing there. Because if you don't have that little spark, I mean, education can just be really, really, really dreadful. So
no, we met one of the kids just a little while ago that talked about his goals, and at least at the middle school we walked through, they incentivized them with stuff, right? So I forget what he got when he met goal 1.
He got to wear a black hoodie.
So that was goal 3.
Because no one's allowed to wear hoodies. Oh yeah, right. Yeah,
and
right. That was goal
I forget
3.
the fellow's name who walked us around. He was like, the principal or whatever, he said, I hate hoodies, but these kids, that's what they wanted as their preem, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I don't remember what they got for the first goal. Second goal was a cool pair of socks. And then the third goal, dude, was the black hoodie.
The black hoodie.
They'll do anything for a black hoodie.
Yeah. And that principal's name's Taylor. And
I have amnesia.
But another example, I mean, of how we do things differently. I mean, he was a miserable UT Austin law student,
right,
who said, man, this isn't for me. Like, I want to work with kids. And, we spotted that talent right away and said, this guy's going to be running a school for us. So
crazy. How do you handle some of these, and this is where I do get political because I just can't stand it. But there's, in the education system, especially here in the state of Texas, there are controversial things. For example, evolution versus creation, the debate in and around that, what goes in the textbook, what doesn't go in the textbook. I have very strong views on that as a parent and as just a person. How does your crew handle things like that?
Yeah. Man, I mean, all these hot button issues, is it going to be, monolingual, dual language, English only, creationism versus evolution, where the kids going to go to the bathroom, and we're going to have like transgender, like those issues never, ever come up. I mean, our kids are on a mission. Our teachers are on a mission. Our principals are on a mission. They don't have time for any of that BS. I mean, they just really don't, and so I mean, that's probably the best way I can answer that question.
But the textbooks are still issued by the state of Texas, or you guys have a whole different set of textbooks?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably some textbooks in a cupboard somewhere, but it's just it's different these days, man. Yeah. It's just like our best teachers, it's books, not textbooks. There's a lot of different books our kids are reading, but yeah.
And these kids are cranking out like the one discussion about how many words. I mean, I never even heard this my whole life. Like, I don't read books, which is one problem. Probably why I've never heard of it.
Well, you write them.
Somebody else writes them for me, and I talk about these things, and then somebody writes it down. But these kids trying to get to a point where they've read 1 million words.
Yeah. So like those 7 books in Harry Potter. That's about 1 million words. That whole series. So we have these second graders. I mean, they're trying to read 1 million words this year, which is crazy. And like all the research shows. I mean, it's just like cycling. You want to be a better cyclist, you better get on that bike a lot longer. You want to be better at basketball, better shoot a lot more hoops. You want to be a better reader, you just got to read a shit ton of books. So that's what we have our kids doing.
So words equals miles.
Yeah, that's right.
One other thing that came up today when we were walking around was this issue of ICE. And obviously we've said it, most of your students or student population is Hispanic, and some are here either legally or illegally, but there was one episode, and we can and or not talk about it, either one, but where ICE had come for this family. Yeah. And you guys, were largely supportive of them.
I mean,
very supportive.
The courts have been clear on this. I think that basically churches and civil liberties groups have been pretty clear on this as well. People in the United States who are school age, they deserve a high quality free education. Period, paragraph, page. So that's our responsibility. We're not law enforcement. We're not a police agency. We have no business at all inquiring about anybody's legal status. And traditionally, for dozens of years, both parties have said that schools and hospitals are off limits. We need for people to be able to turn to these institutions. So unfortunately, things have gotten a little bit crazy. But I'll take an example of this young man right now. At the beginning of the story, I'll tell you. So this boy is born in Matamoros, which is the border town across from Brownsville. It's in Mexico.
Right. Super violent.
And he's actually living in an orphanage. And he hears that he has an aunt who lives in Brownsville. So he busts out of the orphanage one night, and he crosses the Rio Grande. He literally is, walking across, wading across, at a point swimming across. And he's doing this with his 2-year-old little brother on his shoulders. And he gets to the U.S.
But hang on, to an aunt that may not exist.
To an aunt that may not exist.
Right.
So he gets to Brownsville. He finds this aunt who's got her own issues that she's got to deal with. Somehow he finds his way to our school, comes in as an 8th grader, not speaking a lick of English. And by his senior year, his entire, course, his whole schedule is full of advanced placement or AP courses, which are like the hardest classes you can take.
Crazy.
You got a kid who's a senior right now, this. He's 2 months away from graduation, and he's driving to McDonald's where he has his part-time job, just trying to help the family out, make ends meet. And he gets pulled over, and the police officer says he was speeding or something. Where's your driver's license? I don't have a license. Why not? because I'm here illegally. They get customs immigration on the phone. They come. So they put this kid, the 17-year-old, a senior, they put him in a detention center, and his teachers are shuttling homework to him, back and forth every day. We get some good legal help for the kid. We bust him out of that detention center. He graduates and, goes off to A&M. Just these amazing, stories like this. So, again, our country is better because the most motivated people from other countries are the ones who come over here. And they're the ones who generation after generation, kind of make the American dream possible.
Dreamers.
Dreamers, exactly.
Dreamers.
There we go.
I don't care what you said 20 minutes ago. I'm not ever going to believe that you're not running for U.S. Senate. What you just said, who doesn't vote for that? I know what you said also I could do, but you're going to have, this thing's going to get set up, going to be rolling. You'll have time. Just whatever. You don't have to say anything else.
Will you be my running mate?
No, you don't want my baggage on your ticket. So that is an amazing story, that young man. There's got to be some awful stories. There's got to be some sad, really sad stories with these families.
Yeah, my gosh, like every family, and that is not income bracket or race or geography related, right? Some of our kids who I think have the biggest challenges. My kids go to our schools. My wife's a physician. Cool. I got this job that I have, but on a bad day, one of my children, I won't say which one, can be one of those horror stories. He really gives those teachers a run for their money. But I see a lot of very affluent kids actually having some of the biggest problems because what they want more than anything is time with mom and dad. And that's what they're not getting. They're getting the material stuff. They got the newest, latest phone or whatever. They got on the technology, but they're not getting time. And when you don't get time from your mom and your dad, every little thing that happens on social media gets magnified times 1,000 because that's your sense of who you are as a person. So my wife and I run this all the time. Like we just we got to spend more time with our kids, more time with our kids.
And I believe it to be true. They say that the three, as a parent, and I guess it really doesn't matter the age, obviously the younger the better, but the three most important things you can do for your children and for your family is, and this was reported, I tend to believe it, was have dinner as a family, read as a family, and some sort of a spiritual experience as a family. Yeah. But that's all about everybody being together, mom and dad being there with girl and boy and the whole fam.
And it's harder than ever because now even when families are together, they're just kind of occupying the same space because of these devices.
Did Anna call you?
It's tough. It's tough.
The other day, I thought we had a great dinner, and the next day she's like, I just wish, for once you just wouldn't look at your phone during dinner. And we're so immune to it, like, I didn't know I looked at my phone. I probably looked at it 50 times. Yeah, I'm an idiot.
That look, it's not just you. It is the technology, man. They've wired it to make us like that.
Well, there's a big pushback on that. I can't believe how much press there is now about people insisting, not wanting, but insisting that these folks like Apple or Samsung or whoever, that these devices are just less addictive. There's a real movement.
We have worked as hard as we can to make our school, this is kind of countercultural and almost like doesn't make sense. We're trying to make our schools as free as technology as possible, with the exception of the 1 hour a day when they're in the computer lab doing whatever. But we want our kids to write out notes. You remember things better when you write it out versus typing it. Right. We want our kids to have to be able to talk and argue and debate and do oral presentations. And we want them to be 100% focused on the other humans in the room. And it's getting harder and harder than ever, but it's also giving our kids, our students at IDEA, more of an advantage than ever. Because if you have the ability to concentrate and focus for 60, 90, 120 minutes straight, oh my gosh.
Which I don't.
You are going to, as a student from our school, you're going to have a huge advantage than everybody else. That's just... the ability to concentrate for long periods of time on one task, that's a pretty good recipe for success right there.
That was never my strength, Tom.
Well, you've been doing pretty good here over the last 45 minutes.
I know, because you're interesting, but if you know, there's well, I won't say that, but you know, there's times where I'm not, just like I'm kind of swimming around up here. Yeah. And you got an Ironman coming up. Let's talk about that. Shit, I almost forgot.
I got a half Ironman, half. I've done 3 fulls.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And you know, my first one was in Vegas. My last one was in Canada. My fastest one was Ironman Texas. I did it in 10 hours. Not too bad, but
That's good.
I mean, you're like a 8-hour Ironman. So.
I never did an Ironman.
Well, I know your time. I did Galveston 70.3 the same year you did it one time. And you were an hour or 2 ahead of me. It was pretty amazing.
That was the moment, and we talked about this before we went on the air here, but I struggled so much with hydration and nutrition. I couldn't get the balance down, and Galveston was so miserable. My gut issue was so bad that I said, all right, I have to do something completely different. So I was working off the assumption that I'm going to go as hard as I can for 4 hours. I'm burning a bunch of calories so I can eat, which is what we did when we raced. That doesn't work. That doesn't work at all. And so my gut was just exploding, and not literally, but, and so I turned right back around the very next week, and I was like, okay, I have to go test something else. So I went to Florida for the half Ironman near Orlando, and I said, I'm not going to eat anything. So as opposed to eating a lot, small breakfast, nothing in the race. I might have had one honey stinger waffle, a couple bites on a honey stinger waffle on the bike. And when I got to the run, I had a gel in T2 just in case that I had in my hand, but I never used it, never ate it. And that was it. I mean,
and how'd you feel?
Oh my God. I mean, I was 5th out of the water, 2 hours flat on the bike, and 1:15 on the run.
That's a real good run.
Yeah, won by 10 minutes. Wow. I was like,
okay,
I think I figured it out.
But so this is crazy. So like, what is it about the physiology of Ironmaning that's different from the physiology of like when you're on the bike for 5 or 6 hours straight?
The truth is that in the tour, right? For example, if you do 2,500 miles, very few of those miles are you going heart rate wise. You'd be surprised. Right. I mean, those 5-6 hour days where they're rolling through the French countryside. Yeah, there are days where you're pegged for 5 hours. Very rare. Yeah. Most of the time, it's 4 hours of you're on
Zone
the wheel.
Zone 2 in the heart rate. Or whatever.
Yeah. So you can, when your heart rate is lower, you can eat. Oh. But if you're doing a half or a full, your heart rate's. I mean, those halves I was doing, my heart rate was probably 170s.
Yeah.
So it's just
you're
your
on
stomach
the verge of the red line.
Yeah,
the whole
your
time.
Stomach's not thinking about digesting all this crap you're putting into it.
Huh.
Yeah. I know. But as I told you before, also before we came on here, this Brownlee kid, in Dubai the other day, first out of the water, 158 on the bike and 109 on the run.
That's sick. That's insane.
Superhuman.
Wow.
I'm glad I'm sitting across from you and not next to him as a 46-year-old getting my ass completely kicked. All right, last question.
Yeah.
It's my new question.
Okay.
2018, I ask everybody. What keeps you up at night?
Oh gosh, what keeps me up at night? Jeez. It's my 3 kids.
Yeah.
I mean,
not that they're making noise.
It's we're putting all this. I'm putting all this energy into building this, I think, amazing organization that's changing lives, tens of thousands of kids at a time. And then at the back of my mind, there was like, but am I doing a good enough job with the 3 kids under my roof? Mm-hmm. And on a good day, my answer is yes. But as an educator and my wife's a physician for kids, I always like, man, we should be better at this than we are.
I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's fair to say.
Well,
there's no perfect answer there.
Yeah.
I never try to answer my own question, but if I did, it has to be in and around your kids and what could potentially happen to them. Our kids are also healthy as are yours, I'm sure. But what if they're not?
Yeah.
Like that's the thing that I would be. You'd have to mop me out of the room. I just couldn't handle it. Yeah. All right, buddy. Good luck with everything.
It's been fun.
You got a big 4 years, man. You got to get we have to get 112 more schools built and 64,000 more students.
Yeah. Can I come back on in 4 years and tell you how we did?
Well, I already know how. I know you're going to do it, but you can come back on and tell us what it was like when you went and did it.
Cool.
Yeah. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, man.